I'm Rolland Grady. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I am a current senior studying political science on the accelerated master's track. On campus, I'm involved in the Blackburn Institute as well as with UA Vote Everywhere, where I work as an Andrew Goodman Foundation ambassador. The Blackburn Institute is a program here at the University of Alabama that is focused on civic engagement and leadership development, specifically focused on creating the next generation of leaders that will improve the state of Alabama.
My name is Jordan Davis. I am a 2L at the University of Alabama School of Law. I am a native of Birmingham, Alabama. I am currently on the board for Alabama Values, a civic engagement table, statewide civic engagement table that focuses on digital media strategy and combating misinformation and disinformation in the political realm.
Your t-shirt. Could you tell me a bit more about it and where you got it from?
Sure. So ironically enough, I had a podcast in 2020 and one of the guests on the show, who is now, again, ironically enough, my law school classmate, Monroe Clayton, designed these t-shirts, and he had them going throughout the 2020 presidential election just to engage voters, engage young people, and just to remind them that their vote matters. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people were so disillusioned with voting, and it wasn't because of a lack of concern per se, but it was more so because there was a lack of enthusiasm. And so he used these shirts and other merch items to kind of gauge or engage young folks to participate in the political process and to become more enthusiastic about voting. And so, yeah, that's the background about this shirt.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
When did you first get started doing voting activism, and what kick-started that for you?
Yeah, so I started voting rights activism in 2014. It was directly after the Shelby County v. Holder decision, which gutted the teeth of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so I started with the Alabama Conference of the NAACP doing their youth vote, youth engagement, and it just kind of blossomed from there. I worked on several political campaigns during my time in high school, went on to attend Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, where again, I was on several campaigns, including the Stacey Abrams for Governor campaign the first time, and worked in the mayor's office, worked in the Georgia General Assembly. And so I've always had my hand kind of in the political realm. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until my first internship with Congresswoman Terry Sewell where I really became super engaged in the long-term fight for voting rights. Of course, with Shelby v. Holder and other consequential landmark cases that weakened the Voting Rights Act of 1965, it became clearer for me that this was something that we needed all hands on deck for, and that if it was not us doing the work, then who? Yeah. And so I took personal responsibility for that fight, and I just tried to do my part in educating and teaching folks about the importance of voting. How did you get started?
I also got started in 2020. So that was my senior year of high school, and that was the first time that people my age really had the ability to vote. At that point, I was pretty young for my grade, so I was still 16 around this time. But I remember talking to a lot of classmates, kind of being jealous about the fact that they were going to be able to vote and I couldn't, and learning that a lot of them weren't planning on voting because a lot of them just felt like it's too complicated. Right. I can't make the right decision. I don't feel educated enough on this to really vote. And it kind of started out with a little bit of jealousy of like, these people can vote, but not me. And talking with friends from my school, we kind of were like, someone needs to do something about it. And then it was kind of, if not me, then who? Yeah. So we went forward and we got approval from our school, and we created voting guides and did classroom presentations across our school to all of high school, and also registered people to vote. And then I loved getting texts on election day that like, hey, I'm here, I'm voting, or like, quick question before I go in. And I think it was really then where it solidified to me like that, how important it was and how easy it was for people to just forget about it, or just the intimidation factor of it all. But kind of creating a community around it really drove people to the polls.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, did you grow up in a household that kind of had a mantra to vote? What was that like growing up, for you? And
yeah, so we did have a strong voting culture in my household, but it was never really said. It was just kind of taught that this is something you do. It's like doing the laundry, like you go vote every year. Yeah. So that's always been something that I've definitely taken with me. It was definitely instilled by our grandfather, who, when my mom was actually pregnant with twins in her third trimester, he still picked her up and was like, you've got to go vote for a school board election. And she did. So it's kind of just always been something that, you do. And I remember when I was in school and I learned about the suffragette movement, that was the first time where I kind of understood that like not everyone had that right. And then as I got older, I learned about the civil rights movement and just continuously how hard people fought for voting rights in our country, and that it was not something you could really ever take for granted.
Yeah.
What about you? Did you grow up in a household where it was emphasized?
Absolutely. My parents treated voting days as if it were Sunday. We woke up very early, put on our clothes, and were usually the first ones in line to vote. So it was definitely kind of a religion for us. But it was always because my parents had us around older folks who instilled, kind of like similar to you, who instilled the importance of voting, who made sure that we knew that this right to vote was bought with a precious price, and that voting is an act of faith. When you cast your ballot, you are acting in a way as if you are putting your faith into a greater institution, an institution that is greater than yourself, with the hope that it can and will change. And so that's something that was always instilled into me and my sister. And so we have taken that with us. My sister is 18 now, and this will be her first election.
So
and so she has been registering folks. And so I said it continues. But yeah, that's kind of what the culture of voting was like in our household.
Yeah. And I think once you really understand and can comprehend the price that people paid and what happened for us to have voting rights across the country, and the fact that they're still under attack today with Shelby v. Holder, and we're still facing the consequences of those. I mentioned previously that I work as an Andrew Goodman Foundation ambassador, which is named after Andrew Goodman, who was murdered during the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project. And I think once you understand the story and once you read through it all, you can never look at it the same, because this was so important that so many people laid their lives down for it, and to continue to honor that sacrifice every day by voting and practicing and creating this culture of civic engagement across it, because if it wasn't so important, then people wouldn't be trying to stop you from voting.
That's exactly right. And I just think about a phrase that Congresswoman Sewell often says: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so voting is something that is kind of like a Sunday dinner. Like if you miss Sunday dinner, you can't complain that you're hungry because you missed Sunday dinner. And so it's an open invitation, and folks have bled and died for this most basic and sacred right as American citizens. And so I think a lot of times folks are just kind of not unconcerned, but like just unenthused about who we have as candidates. And I can't blame them, because sometimes our elected officials do not make good on the promise of good policy. And so I think folks have to be reminded of their power as individuals. So what are some of the ways that you have kind of shown others that there is power in the collective vote, and that their voice is important to be casted when casting at the ballot box?
I think one thing I like to remind people is really to bring it back down to a local level. Like I always like to give the example of once I was really upset because they changed the day that they pick up the trash in my hometown, and it messed everything up, and we were all so upset about it. But matter of fact is we voted in those council members who voted for that a few weeks prior, and no one really voted. And now we're facing the consequences of it. And it might sound silly, just trash collection, but it's something we thought about every single day. And those are really the issues that are going to change your everyday life. And then the further you go into it, then the higher up you go. And it just really comes back down to that local level. And also just understanding that this is a right that people have fought and died for. And just knowing that like this is how you can make your voice heard. This is really how you're able to create change that will help the people you love. What about you?
So particularly with presidential candidates, I often tout that we're not voting for presidential personalities, but this is an administration we're voting for. So the people that we put in the president and the vice president seat, they have the ability to appoint others for different departments that are integral in making our government work, right? But also showing folks that when you show up for presidential elections, it's not just the president that's on the ballot. there are down ballot candidates who have a direct impact to your life. And so often I talk about like judges are on the ballot in November, right? And so when you want to know who is going to be deciding the fate of your family member when they go before a judge, and so I often just have to really bring it back down to real life issues that people are facing and just showing them how the political process affects every area of our life, because politics is personal. It's so personal. People can try to say that, oh, I don't do politics. Well, politics will do you when you think about it. And so it's so important that we just hone in on the importance of folks understanding the importance of down ballot candidates and not just focusing solely on the presidential candidates. So that's super important.
How do you think being from the South and living here for so long has kind of impacted the way that you view voting and the way that you view community organizing?
In the words of Andre 3000, the South always got something to say, right? And so I think that the South is such a special place when it comes to voting, especially a place like Alabama, who gave way to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but we also were the state that took it away. And so understanding the rich legacy that we come from, and also understanding and remembering that ordinary people in the South did extraordinary things in the 1950s and the 1960s, and we have the power to do that again. There's, again, I say it all the time, there's power in the collective, and so understanding that the South is super important, and as goes the South, so goes the nation, and we really have to understand the importance of Southern politics.
Yes.
The demographics in Southern in the South are changing, and so just understanding that there is a collective power there, and we have to use that to invoke change. Essentially, how do you feel about kind of Southern politics and the way the South has influenced politics and policies in our nation?
Yeah, I think coming from someone who's lived in the Deep South their entire life, I think the South is a beautiful place and it's filled with beautiful people and beautiful culture. And I think voting is one of the ways that we're able to show the rest of the country that we are a place with culture that is rich, that deserves to be talked about, and that deserves to be studied. And I think being able to vote and being able to prioritize your community is Southern culture. We should all be looking out for our neighbors. Southern hospitality goes to the ballot box as well. You should be thinking about how your actions impact other people. And I think moving through that as a Southern person, it's really been important to me to kind of be able to really show that. And also whenever I feel a bit embarrassed about Southern history and like knowing that Alabama struck down the Voting Rights Act, it's been powerful and motivating to know that we can change the course of history by continuing to organize, by following this legacy, because we do have such a rich legacy of community organizing and of activism that starts in the South. And we have that power completely, and it's kind of up to us to do something with it.
And I know Louisiana had a big win in terms of redistricting. So can you talk about like what that was like? Because I know also Alabama had a big win in terms of redistricting for the first time in like 150 years since the state was, brought into the union. Black folks are actually getting the representation that they deserve. And so what was that win like? What is it like seeing victories in the South? What does that do for you in terms of momentum and motivation to continue this work?
It's really energizing, especially because I feel like when I look at a national level or work with nonprofits that are a bit more national, there are times where I know what they're thinking when I talk about the places that I'm from. But it kind of reaffirms the fact that now the rest of the country is able to see how beautiful and how diverse these places we call home are. And also knowing that my neighbors are going to be able to elect someone that represents them. And that there's a fair shot at it. Obviously, I don't know all the intricacies of districting. I'll leave that to the law students. But I think there's something really powerful about seeing the energy come back into people, and just from the people I've been able to have conversations with about their excitement for voting this year in their new districts and in their new areas, and knowing that they have a shot at electing someone who they feel truly represents them.
And it also just changes the narrative that the South isn't a winnable state or region for progressive policies and politics, and it really brings back the investment, because so many people because they feel that the South is not winnable, if you will. They tend not to invest, but we need to invest in Deep South politics so that we can actually continue to see this momentum happen and occur, and we can continue to bring folks on board to be voting rights activists and advocates. It's so amazing.
Yes, and I think there's also something so wonderful about seeing people from their hometowns and from these communities be able to go up on this national level and defend their communities and be able to create effective change for them. And I think it serves as an inspiration for young people across the state who might feel like they don't really have the same shot as maybe some of their peers in other parts of the country, but also knowing that you're had this chance to be a part of some really incredible history, and now it's your turn to take up the mantle and continue the work that was started.
So good. So I know we have to wrap up, but I'm curious to know, how can folks get involved with all of the amazing work that you're doing as a student activist around voter engagement and civic engagement?
I think one really great way to get involved is to look at the people who are already doing the things in your community, or if you're a college student on your campus. I know Vote Everywhere UA, we're incredibly fortunate to have built up a long-standing culture, and such as our National Voter Registration Day activities, and we always love to accept volunteers, whether it's organizations who want to volunteer. We have a lot of different Greek life partners, or just anyone who's really looking to get involved. Another really simple way to do that, if maybe you don't think you have that volunteering capacity, is just talking about it online, posting something to your Instagram story, posting a voter registration link, and kind of continuing to educate yourself and have conversations with friends. What are you doing for election day? How are you voting? Make a day of it. Like, go get coffee at Turbo and then go to the polls after and have fun with it. And I think that's one really great way that you can get involved on a small basis, is just looking at people in your community who are already doing the things. What about you?
That's so good. I think for me, it's so simple. I think, you know, folks are always on their phones. And so taking like 30 minutes to an hour to make sure folks know where their polling places are, or if they're registered to vote, send a link. I think a lot of times we lose potential voters because access is so limited, or access feels intimidating. And so just making people feel at ease about voting and making sure people understand that it's not as arduous as folks make it out to be, but it's really simple, and making it a group effort. I love that idea. You know, making it fun. Voting is fun. It should be fun, and there's so much power in it. And so
there is, and you get to feel like you did a good thing. You get a little sticker afterwards.
Right. Show off the sticker on Instagram. Yeah. So I think those are exceptional ways to kind of engage people and let them know that they have a voice too. Yeah. Because their vote matters.
Let's make our voting plan.
Let's do it.
We are so appreciative of our incredible guest, Rolland Grady and R. Jordan Davis. We also want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Turbo Coffee for hosting us in their fabulous downtown Tuscaloosa coffee house. And now, a moment of appreciation for Share the Mic's unsung heroes. Ronnie Gatry, our videographer, Imandre Johnson, our social media director, Libby Lassiter, our producer, and Elaine Hurd, creator of our episode trailer. Without them, the show would not be possible. To support our 2024 mission to engage youth in voting, follow us on social media and share this episode with your friends. Together, we can make a difference. This podcast is a proud production of Share the Mic LLC, a small band of diverse friends with a passion for social justice. Thank you for listening.